Good afternoon, good evening, Fabienne. Thank you so much for being with us today and for the time lapse. Without further delay, the floor is yours to present SDG Impact. Thank you very much, Fabienne.
I'm Michelle, and I'm the Director of the SDG Impact Initiative of UNDP. It's a flagship initiative of the UNDP that has been designed to help catalyse investment towards achievement of the SDGs. It's part of the standards development is part of a broader piece of work, so the development of standards as well as investor maps that help to direct investment to where it's needed most. Thank you. Next. Thank you. So next slide. Next slide. Thank you. Excellent. So just before we start, I think that one of the things I would say to this audience, especially given the focus at the moment on the EU regulations and taxonomy and green bond standard, is that we would really say that looking at the SDGs, should be done in a broader sense and really look at the business opportunity of the Sustainable Development Goals. For instance, 12 trillion annually in US dollars could be unlocked just by pursuing opportunities in the SDGs in four systems, including agriculture and cities and wellbeing, for instance. And just achieving gender equity would increase GDP. The global economy by more than 25%. So there's a broader business case for the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDG impact standards have been designed as an internal decision-making framework to help shift private sector engagement with the SDGs from alignment to action. And they're needed because our current systems and practices are not serving the long-term interests of humanity or the planet well. I think one of the key elements that I would stress in terms of the SDG impact standards relative to a lot of the focus around reporting is that these are very much designed around helping to make better decisions internally and really provide the blueprint for integrating impact management and the SDGs into internal practices and decision making that will make meeting disclosure and reporting requirements under existing but also under future reporting and disclosure frameworks more efficient and effective. Thank you. Next. So the standards are all about trying to shift mindsets and changing behaviours. So really from an add-on to what business gets done to how all business gets done. From being more backward-looking to being more forward-looking, from SDG alignment to SDG action, and from reporting to decision-making, really recognising that the decision-making comes before the reporting. And also from the perspective of measurement, looking at measurement in the broader context of how we manage impact more effectively and take that from being more operational to strategic. And very, very much in line with the EU regulations, focusing on sustainability more broadly, not just financial risk management, and moving from that inside out view to a much more egocentric and outside in view of the world, so that we move from being, our current state in terms of being unsustainable to a long-term equilibrium. Thank you. Next slide. So I thought I'd include this slide really to show the relationship between the SDG impact standards and the EU sustainable finance regulations and show how they complement one another. So obviously the standards take a broader view across all of the sustainable development goals, but the EU taxonomy can be easily plugged into the management approach, and the reporting frameworks can also fit within the transparency section of the standards. So the SDG impact standards really provide the management system which provides concrete best practices for effective impact management and decision making, and one source of truth from which to prepare current and future reporting requirements. Interestingly, in terms of the taxonomy, we recently, or National Development Bank of China recently issued a SDG-linked bond where they actually used and piloted both the SDG impact standards, but also a taxonomy that's been developed in China by the UNDP. So in that pilot, they actually showed how taxonomies can fit within the structure of the standards. So the SDG impact standards are principles-based and flexible, so they enable interoperability with other key frameworks, including the EU regs. Like the EU framework, they're based on impacts on sustainable development rather than enterprise value. They incorporate many of the same elements, such as do no harm and upstream and downstream impacts, the concept of thresholds and of being evidence-based. Provide a decision-making framework for incorporating do no harm based on materiality, and provide a consistent decision-making framework for financing activities that do not yet benefit from or may be unsuited to a taxonomy-based approach. So in many respects reinforce the EU objectives as good practice and internal decision-making are the precursors to good quality reporting. Next slide, thank you. So this just shows where the standards fit in the current toolbox of principles, tools and reporting frameworks. And what we really did was try to focus on where we saw a gap in the current market infrastructure between high-level principles, all of the metrics and tools and the reporting frameworks. So really what we've tried to do is create an overarching decision-making and organisational framework for embedding economic, social and environmental impact management and sustainable development into decision-making, and really by focusing on actions in standard business practices around strategy, management approach, transparency and governance. Thank you. Next slide. In the design of the standards, we took into account a lot of things that were already in existence, and rather than try and replicate good work that was already there, really look to actually just point to that in terms of the standards and the guidance that we're currently focusing on. So the standards embed the Sustainable Development Goals and IMP's ABC impact classifications as the language for impact. We've incorporated the UN guiding principles for business and human rights and others in terms of defining the responsible business practices. The standards, we believe, are consistent with several high-level principle frameworks. So to the extent the standards are being followed, you would be in alignment with any or all of those principle frameworks, and they link to other complementary decision-making frameworks and useful resources and tools through the guidance which we're currently developing. Thank you. Next slide. 4 sets of standards have been developed so far. Enterprises have just finished their second public consultation and will be working to finalise those in the next month or so. These standards for bond issuers and private equity funds are already out, and we've also released a set of standards in with OECD for private sector partners deploying public sector funds through the DAC. Thank you. Next slide. Actually, we'll skip this one. Next slide. Thank you. So the standards are supported, as I said, by guidance notes and resources. We're working with Duke University on an introductory free course around impact measurement and management, and we're also working on an assurance framework and SDG impact seal. Thank you. Next slide. And really the case for assurance is the same for impact management as it is for other things, really to underpin trust, credibility and confidence, improve impact integrity and reduce impact washing, reduce risks of management bias and blind spots, and really help to drive the sector forward. Thank you. Next slide. And that is it. So I'd just like to thank you for your time. I have provided a more detailed presentation deck, which hopefully will be available for anyone who's interested, that goes through the standards in a little bit more detail. But thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Fabián, for your presentation and presenting the SDG impact standards. And congratulations, by the way, because it's really a needed initiative to bring all together the different asset classes. So thank you very much. We'll be in touch for sure in the coming future. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bueno, pues seguiremos con nuestra jornada. Como veis, bueno, los ODS, ¿no?, son el paraguas que nos guía a todos, el paraguas que plantea Naciones Unidas y bueno, desde luego una iniciativa que establezca una serie de estándares bajo, en este caso, el Programa de Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo para clases distintas de activos, pues nos parece algo desde luego muy relevante que estaremos promoviendo desde el PNUD. Vamos a continuación. Esta mañana tendremos 4 sesiones, serán 2 y 2 en paralelo, que precisamente estarán hablando sobre estándares para la medición y gestión del impacto en distintas clases de activos. Hablaremos de bonos, hablaremos de private equity, ahora en este primer bloque, y a continuación hablaremos de gestoras de activos líquidos, que ya salió con anterioridad, y también hablaremos del segmento PYME. Un segmento, el de la PYME, el de la empresa, también muy importante porque en ocasiones las pymes han podido ser las grandes olvidadas en materia de sostenibilidad, pues por falta de recursos u otras razones. El caso es que vamos a arrancar y quería invitar al escenario a las 2 personas que estarán moderando estas 2 mesas, que son Ana Martínez, o bueno, por orden, Marta Hervás, directora de inversiones de Arcano Private Equity e Impacto. Arcano, que muy recientemente ha lanzado un fondo de fondos de impacto muy interesante y están avanzando mucho en la materia. Y en segundo lugar, Ana Martínez Pina, ex vicepresidenta de la CNMV y ex vicepresidenta también del Task Force de Bonos Sostenibles del IOSCO, que es la entidad que agrupa a los mercados bursátiles a nivel mundial. Muchísimas gracias a las 2. Si os parece, vamos a lanzar primero las preguntas Spark Ups para ver qué opina la audiencia. Y estas preguntas serán válidas como para las sesiones que vienen a continuación. Así que, bueno, os invito a que estéis aquí en directo viendo las respuestas. La primera diría así, la principal causa del retraso de la Agenda 2030 es... Y bueno, pues como veis ahí tenemos una serie de opciones, falta de estandarización, bueno, van cambiando, las tengo aquí por escrito, opacidad de la información, falta de estandarización, incentivos no alineados, cortoplacismo, no incorporación de los stakeholders o no exigencia de la rendición de cuentas. Esta será la primera pregunta que utilizaremos un poco para abrir boca en las siguientes mesas de discusión. Bueno, creo que muy en sintonía precisamente con el tema a debate, ¿no?, que es precisamente la falta de estandarización. También con la no exigencia de rendición de cuentas, cortoplacismo en tercer lugar, incentivos no alineados y la no incorporación de stakeholders, que podría resultar sorprendente, ¿no?, cuando hablamos también del capitalismo en los grupos de interés. Pero bueno, principalmente esta sería la respuesta, la falta de estandarización, que como digo, muy alineado con el tema a debate. Para hacernos una idea, si os parece, para luego abrir sesiones, y si os parece también pasaríamos ya a la segunda pregunta, Spark Up, que dice así: ¿tu organización usa el marco de los ODS para mostrar alineamiento con la Agenda 2030, comunicarlo a los stakeholders, tomar decisiones estratégicas que empujen la Agenda 2030, mejorar la gestión de riesgos, todo lo anterior o nada lo anterior? Entonces, bueno, aquí tenemos también variedad de respuestas, pero ahí tenemos un poquito una respuesta compartida, diversidad de opiniones, pero principalmente el alineamiento con la Agenda 2030. Comunicarlo con los stakeholders, que es curioso porque es un poco, parecería contraria respuesta a la anterior, ¿no? Creo que puede ser un tema también interesante a debatir en las sesiones de ahora, ¿no? Toma de decisiones estratégicas que empujen la Agenda 2030. En fin, yo creo que esto nos da una visión un poquito amplia.